The final transmission. The command center of the Kildarian warship Eternal Vigilance was deathly quiet. Admiral Thrix stood motionless before the tactical display, his 4 arms hanging limp at his sides. The holographic projection showed what remained of their once proud fleet, scattered dots of blue, surrounded by an encroaching sea of red. "Another outpost has fallen, Admiral," reported Lieutenant Zalia, her voice barely above a whisper. "Voidborn forces have completely overrun the Cygnus sector." Thrix's skin shifted from its usual vibrant purple to a dull gray, a physiological response to his mounting despair. The Kildarian Alliance, a coalition of 17 sentient species spanning 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, was dying. After centuries of prosperity and peaceful expansion, they had encountered the Voidborn Collective, a hive-minded species that consumed everything in its path, converting organic matter into more of their kind. How long until they reached the core worlds? Thrix asked, though he already knew the answer. "At current trajectories, less than 30 cycles," Zalia replied, her third eye blinking rapidly in distress. The Admiral turned to face the War Council gathered around the command table. Representatives from the remaining Alliance species looked back at him, some with mandibles, some with tentacles, some with faces that barely resembled anything humanoid, but all sharing the same expression of defeat. "We have lost another 2 fleets at the Procyon defensive line," he announced. "Our weapons barely penetrate their adaptive shielding. Our best minds can't counter their quantum-entangled communications. We are running out of options." Counselor Vrex, an ancient Morgan with crystal growths protruding from his exoskeleton, leaned forward. "Perhaps it is time we consider the unthinkable, Admiral." A murmur rippled through the assembled leaders. "You can't be serious," hissed Diplomat Ithel, her feathers bristling. "They are a myth, a legend from the dark ages of space exploration." "Not a myth," Vrex countered. "Our most ancient archives contain coordinates, frequencies, even rudimentary translation matrices. They existed. Humans." Thrix said the word slowly, testing its weight. "A species so violent and unpredictable that our ancestors cordoned off an entire sector of the galaxy rather than continue diplomatic relations. A species," Vrex added, "that reportedly fought the Voidborn once before and survived." The command center erupted into argument. Half the council dismissed the notion outright. Humans were either extinct or had devolved into primitive savagery on their isolated worlds. The other half feared that awakening such a species might bring a threat worse than the Voidborn. Admiral Thrix raised all 4 hands for silence. "We are facing extinction," he said simply. "If there is even a chance that humans still exist, that they might help us fight the Voidborn, we must take it." "And if they refuse?" asked Zalia. "Then we die, just as we would without them," Thrix replied. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, desperation won out over caution. The ancient coordinates were retrieved from the deepest archives, and the communications team set to work reconstructing a signal that would penetrate the dimensional barriers that had been established around Earth's solar system millennia ago. The message was simple. "This is the Kildarian Alliance. We face extinction at the hands of the Voidborn Collective. If humanity still exists, if you remember the stars, we beg for your aid." The transmission was sent. Then they waited. Hours passed. Then days. Hope began to fade. On the 7th day, as the Voidborn breached yet another defensive line, tearing through the Alliance's most advanced warships like they were made of paper, something happened. Every screen in the command center flickered simultaneously. The tactical display distorted. Lieutenant Zalia's console emitted a sequence of tones that none of their communication systems had ever produced before. "Admiral," she called, her voice trembling. "We're receiving a response." The command center fell silent as a voice, clear, confident, and chillingly calm, filled the room. "Message received. Kildarian Alliance. This is Commander Elena Reyes of the Terran Defense Force. Stand by for immediate assistance. Coordinates locked." Stunned silence followed. Then chaos as the ship's sensors began registering anomalies throughout the surrounding space. "Energy signatures detected," shouted the sensor officer. "Massive displacement. Something's coming through." The fabric of space itself seemed to tear open before the viewports of the eternal vigilance. What emerged was not a ship, not in any conventional sense. It was a massive structure, angular and dark, with no visible propulsion system. It simply appeared, as if the laws of physics had momentarily bent to accommodate its arrival. "By the Founders," whispered Thrix. "What is that?" The answer came as their communication system activated again, this time with visual accompaniment. The face that appeared on the main screen was unmistakably human, a female with dark skin, sharp eyes, and short black hair cut in a utilitarian style. "Kildarian Alliance, this is Commander Reyes. The TTF Harbinger is on station. We've analyzed your tactical situation. Your defensive strategies are outdated." The bluntness of the statement startled the War Council. "You've been fighting a conventional war against an unconventional enemy," Rice continued. "That ends today." On the tactical display, the massive human structure, the Harbinger, was now emitting energy readings that overwhelmed the Alliance's sensors. Smaller craft began deploying from its hull, moving at speeds that seemed impossible. "The Voidborn have adapted to your technologies, your tactics, your very way of thinking," Rice explained. "But they've never faced humanity. We've spent the last 1,000 years preparing for this moment." "Preparing." Thrix found his voice at last. "You knew about the Voidborn." Commander Rice's expression hardened. "We didn't just fight them once. We've been fighting them in secret, containing their incursions, studying them. The dimensional barrier around our system wasn't to keep us in, Admiral. It was to keep them out, until we were ready." As the human spoke, the tactical display showed the impossible. Voidborn ships, previously unstoppable, were being systematically dismantled by the human vessels. Their adaptive shields failed. Their quantum communications collapsed. "How?" demanded Counselor Vrex. "How is this possible?" "Because we don't fight like you," Rise replied with the ghost of a smile. "Humanity doesn't seek harmony or balance in warfare. We embrace chaos. We weaponize unpredictability. The Voidborn can adapt to patterns, but we don't use patterns." As if to demonstrate her point, several human ships suddenly vanished from the tactical display, only to reappear behind the Voidborn fleet. Others seemed to phase through the enemy's defenses entirely. "The Voidborn are a hive mind," Rise continued. "They can't comprehend individual action, creative thinking, or sacrifice. Those are human specialties." For the first time in years, Admiral Thrix felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. "Commander Reyes," he said, his skin beginning to return to its normal purple hue, "the Kildarian Alliance formally requests alliance with humanity against our common enemy." Reyes nodded gravely. "Request accepted, Admiral. But understand this. Our methods may seem extreme by your standards. We don't just fight to survive. We fight to win, no matter the cost." Around the command table, the War Council exchanged glances. They had called upon humans out of desperation, with no idea of what they were truly unleashing. Now, watching the tactical display as the previously invincible Voidborn fleet was being systematically annihilated, they realized that perhaps the ancient decision to isolate humanity had not been made out of wisdom, but out of fear. "Commander," Thrix said, straightening to his full height, "we are prepared to do whatever is necessary." Reyes's expression was unreadable. "Good, because what comes next will change the face of this galaxy forever. Prepare your best ships and soldiers. We're taking the fight to the Voidborn. It's time they learned what it means to face extinction." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in silence once more, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not the quiet of defeat, but the hush of anticipation. The humans had answered their call, and everything was about to change. The turning tide. 3 days after humanity's arrival, Admiral Thrix stood aboard the Terran vessel Harbinger, watching in silent awe as Commander Elena Reyes briefed the combined forces of humans and the Kildarian alliance. The human ship's interior defied Kildarian understanding. Surfaces that seemed solid one moment became transparent the next, corridors that rearranged themselves, and technology that operated with no visible interface. The Voidborn have a fundamental weakness, Reyes explained, standing before a three-dimensional projection of what appeared to be the enemy's neural structure. Their hive mind requires perfect synchronization. Disrupt that synchronization, and their entire network begins to collapse. Counselor Vrex tilted his crystalline head. We've attempted communication jamming for decades. Their quantum entanglement can't be blocked. A tall human male with pale skin and silver implants visible at his temples stepped forward. That's because you're thinking conventionally, he said. I'm Dr. Malik, head of stenobiology for the TDF. You tried to block their communications. We're going to poison them. The Alliance representatives murmured among themselves. Explain, demanded Thrix. Reyes nodded to Malik, who expanded the holographic display. The Voidborn neural network functions through quantum resonance fields. We've developed a counter-resonance virus, a self-replicating signal that spreads through their network, creating cascading failures in their cognitive processes. In simple terms, Reyes added, we're going to give the hive mind the equivalent of a seizure. Diplomat Ethel's feathers flattened against her body in alarm. That's biological warfare. Against machines, technically, Malik corrected. The Voidborn aren't truly organic anymore. They're cybernetic constructs with organic components. Lieutenant Zelia, who had been studying the human technology with undisguised fascination, looked up. But how will you introduce this virus into their network? Their systems are completely isolated from outside contact. For the first time since they'd met her, Commander Reyes smiled broadly. That's where the fun begins, Lieutenant. We're going to make them invite us in. The plan Reyes outlined was unlike anything the Alliance military had ever conceived. Instead of defensive positions or frontal assaults, the humans proposed a strategy that bordered on madness. A small team would allow themselves to be captured by the Voidborn, carrying dormant technology that would activate once inside the collective's network. This is suicide, Admiral Thrix stated flatly. This is humanity, Reyes countered. Throughout our history, our greatest victories have come from our willingness to do what others consider impossible. To Thrix's surprise, several humans immediately volunteered for the mission, including Dr. Malik himself. You're a scientist, not a soldier, Thrix protested. Malik shrugged. I'm both, actually. Most humans are. Specialization is for insects, as one of our philosophers said. The combined fleet moved into position near the Arcturus system, deliberately allowing their movements to be detected by Voidborn scouts. The bait was set. When the Voidborn attack came, it was with overwhelming force, exactly as the humans had predicted. The Alliance ships fought with desperate courage, but it was the human vessels that truly shocked Thrix. They moved in ways that defied the laws of physics, appearing to be in multiple places simultaneously, using weapons that manipulated gravity and time itself. How is this possible? Zelia asked as they watched from the Harbinger's command center. Dimensional slipstream technology, answered a human officer nearby. We learned it from studying the Voidborn's own methods of travel. Then we improved it. The battle reached its crescendo when a Voidborn harvester ship, a massive structure designed to consume smaller vessels and integrate their materials, locked onto an apparently damaged human corvette. Just as planned, the harvester engulfed the ship, along with Dr. Malik and his team. Counter-resonance signal activating, reported a human technician. Transmission in progress. On the tactical display, nothing seemed to happen at first. Then, almost imperceptibly, the Voidborn attack patterns began to falter. Ships that had moved with perfect coordination began to drift. Energy weapons fired at random. It's working, whispered Vrex. Commander Reyes nodded grimly. Phase 2. All ships, Execute Operation Sundering. The human fleet moved with sudden, synchronized purpose, diving directly into the heart of the now confused Voidborn armada. Alliance commanders watched in disbelief as the humans engaged at point-blank range, a tactic that contradicted every principle of modern space combat. "They're all going to die," Ethel whispered, horrified. But they didn't die. Instead, the human ships unleashed weapons that tore holes in space itself, creating localized dimensional rifts that fragmented the Voidborn fleet. Cut off from their network, individual Voidborn ships became disorganized, vulnerable. All Alliance vessels, Rise commanded, target the isolated enemy ships. They can't adapt if they can't communicate. What followed was the first decisive victory against the Voidborn in the history of the conflict. As the battle ended, the Alliance War Council gathered on the Harbinger's observation deck, staring out at the field of debris that had once been an invincible enemy force. "Dr. Malik," Thrix asked quietly. Reyes's expression remained neutral. His team accomplished their mission. The counter-resonance virus is spreading through the entire Voidborn network. They won't be able to mount a coordinated attack for some time. But they're still alive, pressed Zelia. They were prepared for capture and integration, Rise answered. Their consciousness cores were designed to detach and transmit back to our receivers once the virus was deployed. The Admiral studied the human commander carefully. "You expected them to survive all along." "We hoped," Rise corrected, "but they knew the risks. They volunteered anyway." "Why?" asked Ethel. "Why would your people risk themselves for a galactic alliance they had no contact with for millennia?" Rise turned from the viewport to face them. "Because that's what humans do. We explore, we fight, we protect. Not just ourselves, but anyone who needs protection. Even those who once feared you," Vrex asked softly. "Especially those," Rise replied. "Your ancestors were right to be cautious of us. Early humanity was volatile, dangerous. We needed time to mature, to harness our natural tendency toward violence and channel it productively." She gestured toward the stars. "While you built your peaceful alliance, we were preparing, developing technologies, training soldiers, studying the Voidborn. We knew they would return eventually. We knew the galaxy would need humanity's unique capabilities when they did." In the weeks that followed, the tide of the war shifted dramatically. The counter-resonance virus spread throughout the Voidborn network, causing confusion and discord within their once unified collective. Human Alliance joint forces reclaimed system after system, pushing the enemy back with a combination of Alliance determination and human ingenuity. On the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance, now retrofitted with human technology, Admiral Thrix watched as the tactical display showed the Voidborn retreating from their last stronghold in Alliance space. "They're running," Zelia observed with undisguised satisfaction. "Not running," Rise corrected, joining them on the bridge. "Regrouping. The Voidborn won't give up. They'll adapt, eventually. They always do." "Then we'll be ready," Thrix declared. "Together." Commander Rise smiled, a genuine expression that softened her usually stern features. "That's why we answered your call, Admiral. Not just to save you, but because humanity has been alone for too long. We've been fighting shadows and preparing for wars while isolating ourselves from the galaxy." She extended her hand, a human gesture of partnership that Thrix had quickly learned to appreciate. "Perhaps it's time for humanity to rejoin galactic society, to learn from your peaceful ways, even as we teach you to defend yourselves." Admiral Thrix clasped her hand with two of his own. "Out of desperation, we called upon humans," he said, "and everything changed. Not just the war, but the future of our galaxy." As the Eternal Vigilance and a Harbinger moved side by side into the renewed light of a liberated star system, a new era of galactic history began, one in which humanity's capacity for both destruction and protection would reshape the cosmos in ways neither humans nor aliens could fully predict. But one thing was certain. The galaxy would never again underestimate the species that had waited in the shadows, preparing to be called upon when they were needed most.